Thanks for joining us on Relational Practice, a social work podcast. I'm Dr. Jodie Park.
I'm Rose Mackey.
And I'm Jess.
And we are all social workers, very soon to be social workers,
Almost.
who work in New South Wales, Australia, and we work in the fields of child protection, out-of-home care and trauma. And today we're recording this episode on two lands. Jess and I are on Dharawal land and Jodie's on Newen land.
Yeah, thank you. Today we're going to talk about practitioner resilience. And we were just having a chat, weren't we, before we started recording about, I wonder what we're going to say about this. It's very unscripted today, everyone, so it's going to be fun. So really, I think what we want to talk about is how social workers stay strong and effective in the face of constant challenges and constant changes. That's kind of the plan.
That is the plan. So will we start with defining resilience in social work?
I think so. I think let's do that. Do you want, well, maybe let's start with what we think, and then I do have a proper definition. I always like to have something that actually comes straight from literature other than just what we think. But let's think about when we think about, or when we talk about resilience or say that, use that language, what comes to mind?
For me, I think my mind goes into two kind of areas. One is resilience in working with clients. Humans are tricky. That's why we have a job, right? In social work, we're not the nicest humans, and we create and destroy and damage lots of things. And so sometimes working with clients, there's resilience needed around the clients you're working with, but also their family systems or their social systems.
Yep.
And then I also think about resilience needed to work within the system or systems that you're intersecting in social work. So for me, I go, I kind of need a bit of resilience to work with clients, and I need a bit of resilience to work with whether it's governments or NGOs or bureaucracy or just legislation and the systems that sometimes are there to assist and help people, but sometimes create and cause harm.
Cool. Thanks, Rose. What do you think about Jess?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. When I think of resilience, I think of like a mental toughness almost, or an ability to think through things, reflect on them, learn new things, and still have that why about why you do what you do. So it's very values-based. How do you maintain values when they're challenged? How do you move through a difficult situation, an interaction, a problem in a piece of work that you're doing, and still maintain the why and the values that you had coming in?
Yes.
That they, there's a stickiness that's needed, if that makes sense, like a stickability. Yeah.
And I think just adding on to that probably then there's a third dimension to when I think about resilience, and you reminded me of it, Jess, was as social workers, we are also human. We have our own lives, and at times our actual personal life might be impacting on our work life, and it makes how we come to work every day a bit tricky or challenging, and it can make us perform not at our ideal, and it can also then test our resilience and require us to really find some resilience in the profession, even though it may be outside profession influences that's actually challenging us.
What do you think?
See, I think I automatically go to client outcomes when I think about resilience, and then I have to actually remind myself that, no, I'm thinking about resilience from a practitioner perspective. And I don't know why, but I automatically go straight to clients and about thinking about the strategies. I think I kind of link resilience to coping a lot, I think. And I kind of see it as like two sides of a coin. Like you use your coping skills to promote resilience so that next time you're in a similar situation, you have some added dimension to the existing coping skill you have. It's kind of the way I see it. And I mean, I don't know if that's right or that's wrong. I think that's just one element of resilience, actually, if you think about what the literature says.
Yeah.
But for me, it's my go-to. It's always about client outcomes, and then I have to remind myself, no, it's about me as well, and it's about my own self-care, and it's about practitioners, and it's about supporting the development of pro-social coping skills, so positive coping skills. Not that coping skills are positive or negative, they're just things that you use to cope.
Yes. Well, I mean, if you were hitting a bong and a bowl of alcohol every night, I would say that's not social coping skills and probably not necessarily the best way to cope. So I do think in this situation, we could say pro-social or more positive coping strategies.
See, I have to disagree.
Disagree.
I mean, I think that would actually have a huge impact on your life, wouldn't it, if that's the way you coped? But I think that we can feel a lot of shame about the coping strategies that we've needed to develop to manage times of high stress or times of high emotion or times of high chaos.
Mm.
I think that shame actually then adds an added dimension to whatever the issue is that's kind of led to the need for those coping skills. Does that make sense? I
You're
think
talking from a practitioner's point of view or a client's point of view?
in both.
Both. Both.
I think if we can get away from seeing coping skills as positive or negative, but more so we can think about the impact on our lives.
So helpful or not helpful, perhaps.
That's right. Then I think that actually reduces some of the shame attached to the very behavior or the strategy you've needed to develop to manage.
Mm.
I mean,
how's that working for you? Yeah.
Yeah.
From a client perspective, I think we have experience of that every day, don't we, when we work with people? We're constantly kind of reflecting and thinking about how it is that how do they manage their lives day in, day out? But I think from a practitioner perspective, personally, I'm not always good at doing that. I'm not always good at thinking about how do I manage this environment or this work or the impact of this work day in, day out.
And I think it's a bit contextual too. It depends on what your workload is. I think at any particular time, what's happening in your life and what maybe system impacts are there as well. Because I can think of times where I've not thought about my resilience or my coping strategies for months on end. And then I can think of times where I've, had nightmares night after night after night, not slept, didn't exercise, wasn't engaged in any of my self-care, was probably a terrible social worker and manager and dragging myself in, feeling flat, depressed, unmotivated, unsure of my why, and was just habitually turning up, but was when I look back, was super stressed and just, yes, I was showing up, but I actually was not showing up in any way that was helpful to others. So I think it depends on what's happening for you at any particular point in time as to how much you lean into being aware of your coping strategies or skills and the need for them.
Interesting, because I think sometimes in the world, resilience can be about overcoming hard things, and so there almost needs to be a hard thing that you're battling for someone to call you resilient. And I wonder sometimes in the social work field if we can almost bond over that or, inflate that because it helps us feel like we're doing something. But I don't know always how helpful it is.
Do you mean like an example of when you kind of develop this black sense of humor to manage stress as a team?
Yes, as a team, or you might, your way of encouraging each other is to, think about the way that you overcome the really hard things, which can be useful and helpful when there are really hard things. But does resilience always have to be about something being hard?
So are we maybe missing the accumulation of the impact of just social work as practitioners on ourselves and our lives? We think about accumulation of challenges or accumulation of harm and abuse for clients, but I wonder if maybe it's about the accumulation of the social work profession on us as practitioners that maybe we're not so good at turning our minds to.
Yeah.
So if we could link this to burnout and vicarious trauma and the impact of those two things on social work wellness.
Yes. And, if someone hasn't experienced burnout and vicarious trauma, are they more resilient than someone who has, or is the person who's experienced burnout and vicarious trauma all the time the most, there's almost this, are they both resilient, or is one more resilient than another? sometimes you hear people speak about it as though it's a competition of the hardest, who's been through the worst kind of thing.
Well, because I think, sorry, Jess, I cut you off.
No, you're right. Go.
Because I think you're absolutely right. I think it's seen as a personal attribute, isn't it? It's about, are you a resilient person or are you not? But
yes.
And I think it's influenced obviously by your temperament and by your personality and by your informal supports and, you know, your whole social structure. Of course, that influences. That's the kind of the nurture influence, I think. So of who you are as a person, and then how you manage stress and how you develop coping strategies. This is a definition from an article, and I actually forgot to write the name of the article, but we can always produce the article. It's not my words, it's not Rose's words or Jess's words, it's straight from an article. So I just wanted to put that there, and I apologize to the author for not having your name written down. But anyway, what they say is resilience is a complex context and cultural sensitive process that involves both individual traits and supportive social environments working together to foster adaptability and strength. So it's that nature and nurture stuff.
Yeah. And adaptability. I like the inclusion of adaptability.
Yeah. So it goes on. So it says, this means that the ability to be resilient is influenced by both personal attributes, such as strengths, agency, and coping skills, and the surrounding social systems, which include family, school, and community supports. Van Breda, 2018, also presents resilience as a complex and multifaceted concept in the context of social work practice, defining it as a multi-level process. This process-orientated perspective highlights resilience not as an individual trait, but as something that is influenced by a variety of mediating factors that can facilitate positive outcomes despite challenges. Resilience is defined as the capacity to respond to adversity by bouncing back or adapting to such an extent that individuals produce positive outcomes and thrive under challenging conditions.
Ooh, thrive under challenging conditions.
Yeah.
That's a bit tricky for me. Because thriving implies really, outstanding.
Like a stress tolerance.
Yeah, doesn't it? Whereas, and I don't know, is there an in-between between surviving and thriving?
Yeah, I think
I don't want it to be surviving, but is there like a middle ground?
Oh, yeah. I think a lot of the time we're in the middle ground, aren't we?
Well, yes. I don't know what it's called though, but yeah, that thriving bit at the end kind of made me go, oh, maybe I'm not resilient at all. I would say if I look back, there's times
where you feel like you're just surviving.
I've bounced back, but I wasn't thriving in my work. So maybe though it just wasn't being resilient. It was just habitual turning up to work and going through the motions. Maybe that's what it was. Not resilience, just.
Or that is resilience.
Well, is it?
I mean, I guess if you're looking at how do you define something, perhaps you need to think about, well, how do you define what it's not? So what is it not? So that you have the kind of away from part. Not resilience would look like
not showing up to work.
Yeah. Or sometimes stepping away might be part of your your resilience, your ability to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
But maybe it's also about it's a process of development. So, just say you had 6 months of a pretty hard slog at work, and you showed up every day for those 6 months, but you certainly didn't feel like you were thriving, but you probably, felt maybe hopefully a little, I don't know, proud of yourself for showing up on some of the days when it was really hard. But maybe then, you can reflect 12 months later and you can look back and then you can actually see the growth. And that, I think, would be the time where you would really appreciate how that kind of that situation got you to this point where you have currently developed such resilience.
Yeah, I think the defining feature that I'm hearing in both the literature definition and the things both of you are saying is about growth. And that would be the indicator of, whether there's resilience, because whether it's in the moment or you're looking back on it, has there been growth in response to challenge, adversity, needing to show up?
Yeah. reminds me of a time where I was managing uh, a, a team of statutory child protection caseworkers, and it was a really horrible time for me at work, and going to work for a couple of months was really challenging. And I thought that that's what I needed to do. I needed to just grind and, you know, show that stickability and just keep turning up. But it was actually detrimental to my mental health, and it impacted my personal life, and it absolutely impacted my work life. And I ended up taking a break. I stepped away, and it wasn't in a nice planned manner. It was kind of like it got to a point where I was actually having panic attacks at work. And I remember like distinctly standing in the garage of that building having a panic attack, thinking, you cannot be at work and you cannot be helpful to people. Like, you can't even breathe. Like, get a grip. No, and I couldn't figure out what the trigger was, but I just remember having this panic attack, getting to the end of it and thinking, this is not okay. And who the hell are you serving at this workplace right now if you can't even get from the garage, you know, up to the fourth floor to your workstation? So I went off and I engaged in some therapy, some supervision, I guess, to figure out what was happening, and took a good 2 months off work. And I was so ashamed that I could not keep going to work. And I just felt like such a failure. I couldn't tell my parents. I didn't want to talk about it with my husband. I was just like, I'm just a failure. I just couldn't understand it. But I went to supervision, and I worked with an amazing psychologist, actually, and got through it and went back to work and learned a lot about myself in that process, but learned a lot about how I was managing at work and how it must have been for the people I was managing and the clients, and what I needed to change. And so at the time, it was the worst period in my professional life, but actually learned so much. And I still, to this day, think of the lessons I've learned, and it still impacts how I show up to work and what my self-care looks like and what I'm willing to put up with by way of like nightmares or dreams, you know, when you have a particularly horrible matter that you're working on. And sometimes, you know, I've found throughout my career, I do dream about the work. So it's like a warning sign for me. I've learned these are the signs that things are not going okay, and you need to go and do a whole variety of things that I learned at that point in time to overcome that really challenging time at work. At the time, I didn't think I was resilient, but I look back now and I think, well, I was resilient because I got the help I needed. I learned a lot. I went back to work. You know, I took accountability for the things I needed to take accountability for, and I put in different boundaries and expectations for the things that were not, you know, weren't me.
So it's both showing up and knowing when to take a step back so that you can show up.
Yeah. But at that time, it didn't feel like resilience at all, let me tell you.
No, it would have felt terrible. It would have felt really horrible, because I think part of our profession, unfortunately, is this belief that we have to hide our emotions, and if we're not coping, we can't acknowledge that, or we can't tell anyone about that, because that means there's something wrong with us.
Absolutely. And I don't think, apart from my GP and the psychologist, that I told anyone I was having panic attacks at work until now. Like, I think I kept that because I was so ashamed of it. Like, how can you be having panic attacks at work? About work, not about client work either. It was about colleagues.
Yeah.
Whole lot of shame.
That would have just felt so lonely, Rose.
Yeah, it was actually.
Yeah.
And there were lots of people that were supportive, that wanted to help, but it was my own shame. And like you said earlier about, you know, when I said about the drugs and alcohol, the coping, it is the same thing. There is a level of shame. And so I'm so glad you corrected me on that, Jody, because we are all human, and we all engage in things that maybe aren't pro-social or legal or amazing for us as individuals. And if we sustain that level of unwellness or whatever it is, it may impact on us and become something different. But as a coping strategy in the moment, we do feel a level of shame to share and let people know exactly how the work is impacting us or what's going on.
Yeah. And I think there's lots of literature that talks about that being the myth of social workers being superheroes. And that's kind of interesting because when I used to teach the first year social work students, I actually used to show a little clip that was called Social Workers as Superheroes. And now looking back, I think at the time I was like, oh, that's really cool. It was like a TED talk and it was actually quite good, still quite good. I'm a little worried about the name now because now I'm looking back and I'm thinking, what was I teaching those impressionable first year students? What was I teaching them about being able to actually say, this is actually too hard for me right now, and I don't have to always take everything on. The good thing about the TED Talk is it wasn't talking about the personal attributes of the social worker, coping no matter what. It was talking about tapping into kind of the strengths in other people, and that's what we do as a profession. So the message in the clip was good, but the title makes me feel a little uneasy now that I think about it.
Might have been one of those unintended socialization messages.
I think perhaps yes, which is not cool.
Not cool.
But I think there is this myth, isn't there, that we have to, as social workers, we have to always be coping, we have to always be positive, and we have to always be able to see a way forward.
I think that's something I would say I've learned from both of you on placement is I probably have before now this notion of accept every offer and there's a challenge where you better jump in and solve it, or there's a problem you need to attend to it and get it sorted, insert yourself and fix it, like that superhero notion perhaps inadvertently somewhere in the back of the mind, or a duty perhaps. And witnessing times where both of you have said, actually, I'm not going to do that because that's not in the best interest of that client and it's not what I think needs to happen, or I'm not going to do that because that's not in my best interest, that's not going to work, and therefore that's not going to work for that client. And being able to comfortably say, no, I'm not going to jump into that challenge just because it's there, to be a hero about it,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's nice feedback. I think it is a process, isn't it, to get to that point? Would you agree, Rose? And in private practice, I think you're kind of in a bit of a special situation where you can say no to stuff.
Yes.
But it's, yeah.
There's a pull.
There's a pull,
Pull to like, well, I have the skills, I have the knowledge, and I have a different, and sometimes a really nice overview of what's happening, and you can see sometimes a lot more than the people that are actually doing the work or referring. And sometimes there's like this, well, I could easily just say, I think this, and if we did this, and have you paid attention to this, and it could be really helpful. And then I have, but it's knowing when to like, it's not yours to chase, to chase or to fix, or, and I genuinely believe social workers, we like to help people, don't we? That's kind of that value that sits behind the profession. We want to make people's lives more positive or have a better trajectory, or, a different, more positive outcome. So we like to help, but sometimes it's actually helpful to ourselves and to clients to just observe and pass it on.
I think it's about not meeting or matching people in their chaos, and I think that about clients, but more so about practitioners. And I think as a private practitioner, you are, I said before, you are in this kind of special role. Not special, I just can't think of another word. Because because you're sitting so far outside, you can actually see that it's this chaotic environment that's occurring, this chaotic situation, and say a service wants you to kind of join them in that situation, and you can say no because you can see it for what it is. But if you were a part of it, if you're in the middle of it, I'm not sure that you would be able to see it, and you probably you do run the risk of matching people in their chaos.
Yeah,
but I'm just going to say I'm a firm believer, and I learnt this a long time ago. Probably I was learning it when I was in child protection, but I certainly had learnt it by the time I had left, that your drama isn't my drama, and I can choose to join you and take on your drama, or I can choose not to.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that shows up in like people talk about the tornadoes, and that matching. So you're both escalating at the same time. But also I think about if an organization or a group of staff are all outside their window of tolerance, whether they're in hyper or hypoarousal, it's very easy to come in and to be swept into wherever they are in the window of tolerance. So you can see, I think, is that the countertransference and countertransference also it's probably known as, but you can see how that happens so easily. And when you're outside in private practice, you're right, Jodie, you have a much different view of what's happening, and it's a bit of a luxury and I think a strength too to be able to say, I love the saying, not my monkey, not my circus, I just know the clowns.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's very, very true. And I think it does come across sometimes as being a little bit, I don't know, maybe cold, maybe unhelpful. Maybe
it's also a way of containing in a way. Like if you, before someone who's saying, no, we're not going to do that, or that's not going to happen, or I'm not going to follow that or jump into that. So it can be unsettling, but I think with reflection or supervision, which maybe we talk about as well, is that's the thing that kind of makes you stop and think and reflect. Where if someone just responds and reacts, and then you're all caught up, like you say, in the tornado, then there's no one really checking what's going on.
Well, I think that's when you run the risk of really experiencing burnout, don't you?
Yeah.
Because we've talked about this when we talked about supervision in one of those past episodes. Your peers and your colleagues are so important as a grounding tool, like as a grounding opportunity. But they can also take you to places you don't want to be.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think if you are, as a team, if there's dysregulation amongst the team and then that leads to, some discontent about the work or the environment or the agency or whatever, then you're just kind of all joining each other on this little island. That's kind of like a really unsafe, emotionally unsafe and probably chaotic island that you probably, if you can, you don't want to be on that island.
And I think we talk often about groupthink in social work and in teams and the dangers of that. But I wish we talked more about the dangers of group dysregulation and the signs to look for and the strategies to pull whole teams or at least individuals out of that whole group dysregulation. Because I do think emotional safety. And then if you think about clients, and we've talked about parallel process, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, how can you do your best job when you are feeling so internally compromised? You can't do your best job.
No.
You probably can't even do a mediocre job. You're really just kind of showing up and just surviving, really. Okay, do we want to talk a bit about because I feel like, when I think about resilience and more about adapting, and then I automatically go to when the talk of practice is different to the reality of practice.
Yes.
And I think how interesting that is, when it's happening to you, when you're a bit like, this isn't what I learned when I was learning that theory or that, I don't know, that skill or whatever, or doing that qualification. And then I'm kind of thinking about how we adapt to the actual reality and how hard that is sometimes. I'll give you an example because I think I explained that really poorly. But, I remember when I was sitting there doing my child protection training, when you're a new caseworker and you go in and you do that training. And I always remember this one person saying, one of the trainers saying, if a level 1 comes in and that's an immediate response report, and you're not feeling up to it and you're not feeling your best, you can tell your manager, I'm not feeling up to that. I'm not feeling my best.
They did not say that.
They did say that. I remember it so clearly because I remember sitting there thinking, oh, okay, that's not what I would have expected, but that's really nice, isn't it? That's really
The organisation cares about individuals. That's what you would have thought.
But then someone that I started with who did the same training with me, she said that once. She was meant to do an immediate response. She said to the manager, I'm just not feeling my best today. I just don't think I can do it. And honestly, I thought the look on the manager's face, you could imagine what that look was like. I thought if she could kill this person with her eyes right now, she would. And I remember thinking it's not a very nice caring environment. That was a lie. That was a lie.
It is like a pretend agreement. I often talk about pretend agreements, where there's, people say something, but it's not what they actually mean. And those things drive me nuts. Like, just say what you mean and mean what you say.
Yeah. And I think if you look at that from a trauma-informed lens or trauma-informed organization, one of the principles of being a trauma-informed organization is trust, accountability, and transparency.
Where have you gone, Jody?
Sorry. I was trying to sneak out so that you wouldn't notice.
I'm talking about trust and you're sitting down.
I was like trying to do this. It was my
Just trying to make a blooper reel.
It was
I mean, it's very clever. Trust.
Oh no. Next time I'll put my headphones in when you're talking. Oh, she finished? I'll take them out. I mean, that's just really rude. I apologize. That was really rude. Sorry, let's talk about that again.
Trust. So if you think about the principles of trauma-informed organizations and what that means, one of the foundations is about trust, transparency, and accountability. And I'm talking about creating trust, not with the clients, with colleagues, with the organization. And straight up in training, you've been sold what sounds lovely and amazing and what you would expect to read in an article, what you would expect to be taught at university. And then you go into actual practice land.
Yeah.
And not only was the response, I'm sure that person went out, but the body language, the like jaw-dropping moment at that manager, like, did you just have the audacity to tell me you weren't at your best and maybe you're not going? It's just so jarring from, what's told and what's written about often and what we're taught as students or, in courses to what actually does happen.
Yeah.
And it's a really good example because I think we do it a lot in social work. We write lovely things, we talk about things really lovely, and the reality is high caseloads, multiple managers coming and going with different values, different directions. When you think about for clients, how many caseworkers or social workers they experience, that revolving door. And again, they're coming with high caseloads, bureaucratic pressure, ministerial pressure, budgets, and being fiscally responsible, and all of that somehow gets transferred onto our clients. And then we sit here and we talk about resilience in social work and some of the strategies you could employ to manage all of those very real things that happen every day in the profession.
Yeah. It's just not. It's just not reality, is it? I think some of the things that people, the expectations I think that organizations or agencies or managers have for people on the ground, I just think it automatically is going to actually cause some burnout. It's going to cause distrust. It's because it's not reality. Which, when you think about child protection out of home care practice, because that's what we know, and you think about how it's always changing. Like, it's always changing. There's always new things coming, new expectations. And we've talked about this a lot in this podcast. And I think how that, those changing expectations then kind of change the way people have to work. And then what that actually does for people's internal sense of control and comfortability with the role, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think back to when I was at uni in the late 1990s, early 2000s. God, we're old. Going into uni with, I guess, aspirations of a career in welfare and youth work. None of the actual impacts on me as a person were ever discussed in those uni days. Like, I was clearly back then a very young, naive young person. And I do wish someone at some point had said, being in this profession is possibly going to change your values and it's going to change the way you view the world. And some of that, depending on your temperament, your personality, may not be for the best. And you're going to have probably some struggles in this profession as a human being. And you're going to see some things that are probably going to stay with you for the rest of your life. I wish someone had just been honest enough, and I look at colleagues that have got, PTSD or actually just burnout, and they're now working in completely unrelated fields, and still struggling with the impacts of social work profession. I just wish there was a little bit more honesty around, you're going to need some resilience, but also there's going to be some life lessons that are going to stay with you forever. And how might that be for you? Probably still would have finished my union degree, and I don't regret any of the places I've worked. I've learned so much, but I do look at, the way I view the world now versus when I started, and it is completely different.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rose. I think there's a responsibility in there for educators to be giving reality messages that are about real practice to students coming through. And I think that just allows people to make an informed choice about whether they actually want to work in this field or not. Because it's definitely, there's highs and lows in social work, always highs and lows. And there's days where you feel like you are really empowering people to be the best them, or really empowering communities or families, whatever it is. And then there's days where you think, I'm pretty sure I just did the worst intervention I've ever done. You know what I mean? And then what's that going to be? How that must have been felt like from the people. God, that was really badly said. But yeah, you know what I mean. I wish as educators there was some more honesty instead of giving messages that I think intentionally set people up, which is messages about, your job as a social worker is to go out there and agitate for change. Well, I mean, is it? I mean, I think there's an element of social work where we're always considering how things can be changed to actually support people in a different way. But we can't be out there with our banners and kind of going, every system there is terrible, and none of it's working and it all needs to change, because all that's actually going to do is just cause burnout.
Yes. And we know the impacts of change on people as well. Like, there's a whole raft of things that come along with change, and changing multiple systems at the same time too, or always in reform. It adds an extra layer. I think part of the definition was complex and multifaceted or multidimensional. That's just another dimension that's added when you think about the impacts of you as a social work practitioner.
I think we're also different. Like, there are those people who are those banner waving advocacy. Like, there are people who are, that's their thing and they're so good at it. And there are others of us where maybe some quieter advocacy, or, being attuned to the people that you're working with and supporting them to have resilience is your advocacy, or is your way to help others. And I think being aware of your own temperamental traits and your own strengths, and your own proclivities, and working within that is the best word. I like it. Fancy word.
Fancy words.
Is, I don't know, something to be aware of, because I've often felt that what you just said, Jodie, sometimes at uni, where they've, when I've worked in places that organizations, like big organizations, and sometimes at uni they've been talking about, well, you just need to say, no, we're not going to adhere to timeframes because that client needs to, and I've thought, I don't know that that's the most helpful way for me to use social work advocacy. Perhaps it's about recognizing the things I can control in that situation and working with those things.
Yeah.
And yeah, because you feel a bit less than, almost.
Well, I think we need to be teaching students how to work within the system and how to advocate, exactly what you just said, Jess, how to advocate for small changes that will eventually lead to big changes. But you can't work within, say, a huge system like health. Let's use health as an example. You can't work in a big system like health and be that lone voice carrying your banner to work because you're unhappy with something, or because something actually needs to change, desperately needs to change. But you as that lone voice is not going to make that happen. Yeah. But perhaps there's another way that you can advocate for change that actually is not going to be so detrimental on your own mental health.
Will we talk about some strategies for resilience in social work?
Yes, I think so.
So quick sideline story. Back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when I was at uni, we were taught, I guess, our self-care strategy was when you're driving home from work, you need to find a marker on the road, whether it's a house or a shop or something, and that's where you turn it off. You turn off your day. And so when you drive into your driveway or your parking spot at home, the day's gone and you don't bring work home. That's what I was taught for self-care back then.
Right.
Do you want a similar thing, Jodie?
How do you do that?
I'm not sure I never mastered it.
I don't even remember being taught about self-care, to be honest. I actually
Really?
don't remember it. And that doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's probably, maybe I've just blacked it out. But no, I don't remember being taught about self-care.
And I know contextually, that was, 50 decades ago. I get it was a long time ago. But that was, and I went and worked in a detention center for young men. And I remember that's what I was also told there. Like, you need to find a point where after your shift is done, you get to a point and you don't think about it until you're back in the driveway of this place for your next shift. Like, that's when you think about it again. And I remember, like,
Park it.
like, I just couldn't master it. I was like, I suck at this self-care. I'm like terrible. Like, I've big fail. Couldn't do it. And I think contextually over the years, we started moving away from compartmentalizing and pretending like the work doesn't impact us.
Yeah.
And there was more acknowledgement that actually, yes, the work does impact you as a human and you can't just switch it off. I mean, maybe some people can, and maybe I just was terrible at it, but I couldn't switch it off. So it was about developing other strategies. And I can list you that ticker box list of things that you hear people say: exercise, socialize, have a regular bedtime routine, journal, meditate. I can list you those things that you will find in the literature, you will hear people talk about in relation to self-care. And all of it is correct, it's true. But what I found is it has to work for you.
Yeah.
So journaling does not work for me. I'm not a journaler. Like, when I sit in workshops or, I hear people talk about journaling, I roll my eyes because it's not my thing. And that's never going to help me with my self-care. But what I have learned is what works for me is very different than probably what works for you, Jess, or you, Jodie. So it's about, as an individual, finding the self-care strategies that actually maintain a level of you being in your window of tolerance and the work not impacting your life in a detrimental or pervasive way.
So what works for you,
Jodie?
Yes. Yeah.
What works?
What works for you?
Running.
Yep.
And I'll run with a girlfriend who runs and talks full speed. Like, she's so fit and just an energizer bunny. And I don't want to talk on her run, but I like her aggression and her stories. And she also works in a very similar field, and she has amazing stories and amazing challenges. And the angry she gets, so the faster she runs. So if we're at like 10 Ks in and we're on a 15K run, I'm like, I need you to slow down. I can't keep this level. Like, change the story. Let's be less aggressive. But I love how I feel at the end. And I know when I don't run during the week, my work suffers and I start to think more about the work, because I process in my mind as I'm listening to my girlfriend's story. I'm also processing the work. So that works for me. Having one day a week where I finish and I don't take my computer home and I'm home with my family by 5:30 and I don't look at my phone. I don't do any work. I have to do that once a day, and I have to have a weekend activity that I actually want to go to. So not like, often there's kids' parties or family events or things you got to do, but something I want to do for me. They're my self-care strategies.
Yeah.
3 very simple ones.
Sorry, Rose, I laughed because I was wondering what you were going to say about that activity that you don't want to go to.
I know.
It's something probably.
Do you have activities you have to do that you don't want to do?
Yeah.
Of course. And I think you have a lot more of those activities when you have children.
Yes.
Children who actually want to get on with other children.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah.
What are your self-care activities, Jodie?
I think I probably have, I feel like I have like a staged process of self-care, because there's things that I would do every day. And it's a bit different now, but when I when I used to work, particularly in child protection, I used to use the drive home because I always had like a half an hour drive home. I used to put on really loud music, and that actually, by the time I got home, it felt like that was getting all of that kind of internal, I don't know, those big strong feelings out, because I would sing really loud, and by the time I got home, I felt much better. So it was always about
Thinking
putting loud
so
music on.
regulating his.
Or there was a particular friend that I probably would not have gotten through. A lot of days I used to ring her and I just used to rant. So she would just settle back and I would ring and just rant. And then at the end we'd laugh because it was just so funny. It was funny when you think about how ranty you get. I think I've always been really lucky because I've talked about this before, but because I always had big family commitments with little kids. By the time I got home, I actually couldn't really focus on work because I had so many other things to do.
Yeah.
I think that was really helpful. In hindsight, that was really helpful because it meant you couldn't focus. You couldn't let that define your time outside of work because you were too busy. Yeah. I also now though I need to have a planned weekend off, a whole weekend, and that helps me to kind of get through other weeks which are particularly busy.
Yeah.
I like it. What are yours?
So I used to, when I first started working and I started working as a caseworker, and I did before I had any kids, I would get home and shower immediately. And it was like a reset, like that, look at the stop, but not because I don't know, but I'd do what I called comfortify, which is like chuck on some trackies or boots or just comfortable clothes. And my husband would say, "Oh, have you comfortified?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I just need to go comfortify," and that would just be, I'd go do my thing. But then, like you said, Jodie, you get home. I've now got several children, and I can't just go have a shower. Yeah, when I used to hear people talk about getting up early in the morning for their own time, I would roll my eyes and think that is not for me. But I have 4 children now, and that is a nice time before they get up. I struggle with it a bit in winter, but definitely in the summer, I like to get up half an hour at least before my kids get up. And I'm one of those weird people who likes journaling.
I know you are.
Yeah.
And so it just works for you.
It works for me. And I've had a diary or a journal since I was 9 years old, here and there, not always had one, and I'd be in and out of that. But I think I'm such a verbal processor that if I needed someone to listen to everything that was happening in my head, people would just be like, "Shut up." So the journal doesn't say that to me. I can just journal away, and that lets me verbally process and reflect and get out any frustrations and sift my thinking. And then I can look back and go, "Wow, that was a lot," or, "Oh, that made sense," or, "That was a good reflection," or, "Why were you thinking that?" And that's a helpful way for me to kind of sift what I'm thinking through. And I think supervision is really important, and exercise. Yeah, I do like exercise too. Not necessarily long run, actually, definitely not long runs. Can't do that to save my life. A bit of HIIT training, like fast stop, or weights, lifting heavy things. But then spending time with my kids, like you said, Jodie, I think when you have little people and you get home and you can just so into sitting and reading them a book or hearing about their day or talking, we do high-low buffalo at the table with the kids. What's your high point? What's your low point? What's your buffalo? Which is a funny thing that's happened for you. And hearing everyone's, parts of their high-low buffalo. Those things, I think, all together are part of self-care for me.
So really what we're hearing is you need a bit of self-awareness. So like if you know you're such a verbal processor and no one's got the time, you need to like break it up. So and self-awareness around like, I know if I don't run my poor clients and probably poor Jodie because she's in the office with me, not a good mix. So self-awareness of what happens when you're not engaged in what works for you, but also knowing yourself well enough to know and trying different self-care strategies, because it's not always going to work. And forever, I don't think you'll have the same self-care strategies. And whether it's about you having young kids and then your children, leaving the house and you become empty nesters, there's other transition points in your life where I think your self-care strategies, they will change and you'll need to adapt and grow them because they're not always going to remain the same. But also having something that fulfills you outside of work, so your whole identity isn't work, is also another aspect of the self-care.
And I think that's what's really important in the literature about burnout, is not having all of your social system connected to work as well, making sure that there is a separation in some way.
It's very true. Very true.
Yeah.
The literature is correct. That is not a time where it's written one way and in practice it's different. I think there's a lot of congruence there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely. Yeah. I think the other thing, Rose, when both of you were talking, actually, I was thinking the other really important part, I think, of self-care is about doing something that just brings you a sense of control over something.
Yes.
Because that's what.
Yes, and I know when I start cleaning my cupboards like a mad lady, that I need to, like, what's happening? Because I've got no control and I'm rage cleaning and I'm trying to control something. And if it's only the cupboards, I need to get to supervision, or I need to say, well, what's going on, Rose? Because you can't, that's my sign of you've lost it. You haven't engaged in good self-care and something's happening and you're probably not so aware of it.
Yeah. I just have to come to a solution. So if I'm feeling out of control particularly about a work scenario or a work situation, I just have to keep thinking about it till I work out possible solution. And then I have to write that solution down or email it to myself, and then I'm fine.
Yeah, wow, okay.
You don't have like a leftover task hanging in your head.
Yeah, or just a way forward. Because I think for me, I just don't like it when I don't have a way forward, because I'm always someone who I'm pretty used to being able to work out a solution. Might not be the best solution, but in my mind, it gives me a bit of control.
Yeah, I like it. It's like writing a list at the end of the day of the things you didn't get done, so it can be left on your desk and tomorrow you can come in. That's been a helpful strategy at times for me too.
On the same. Yeah.
Get it out. Yeah.
Okay, I feel like that's probably it. Do you reckon? This has been a interesting conversation about resilience. That's kind of very.
You don't look very impressed, Jodie.
No, I'm impressed. I don't know. It's just it always feels a bit different to me when we have, I don't know, like a theoretical conversation, which is kind of a little bit dry, rather than when we're telling funny stories about practice.
Yeah, it's not the same, is it?
It's not the same, but I mean, still really important. Hopefully really important, and hopefully really useful for anyone that's listening to this. Can we just very quickly, Rose, talk about all our exciting Q&A thing that we want to do?
Sure. But it's just a chat. Bringing people in live, it's like, it's just a different level, really. Makes it real.
Is. Well, yeah, I think it'd be good. I mean, I don't know what questions we're going to get, but what we're asking people to do is, we don't have a date for the Q&A yet because we want to see how many questions we get, whether we get any questions, what they are, what people want us to talk about. But we are happy to answer any questions that you might have, I guess, about our practice, about us as social workers, I guess about anything really social work related. Yeah.
Yep.
So if you have a burning question that you would like us to talk about or to answer, just email it in. Our email, relationalpractice01@gmail.com, or send it all those other ways that you can send stuff via social media, and that's Rose's thing, not mine. But just kind of send us some questions, and we will do a live Q&A session.
Yeah, and we're not going to do it until we get at least 7 to 10 questions, Jodie. We want to make it worthwhile. So please send us any questions you have, anything we've said on the podcast, anything we haven't covered, anything that you might have thought, hang on, explain that better, or was that edited out and you've missed some part of it because it doesn't make sense. Send us anything.
Yes.
Or here's a challenge I have, what should I do?
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah.
This is what I'm facing in my work and I'm a bit stuck, or
as long as it's de-identified.
Yeah, of course. Perfect. Of course.
So now I'm a little bit excited.
Now you're excited. You're going to love it. You're going to be all over it. I'll have to be like, Rose, let me say something.
Shut up, Rose.
You're going to be into it.
Righto.
All right. I guess that brings us to the end of another episode of Relational Practice, a social work podcast. We hope today's discussion was valuable for your practice. In our next episode, we're going to have a very special guest. We're going to have Dr. Kenny Call coming to talk to us, and we're going to have a chat about ambiguous loss, which I think
I can't wait for that. And hopefully, because Jess is nearing the very end of her placement. So I did tell Jess, so she's going to be like our third ring in. So hopefully you'll hear Jess again on the podcast. I think you will. But Jess has also developed some of the tools that Jodie and I use in ambiguous loss, and hopefully we can have them up somewhere too to share them with you all. So it will help, hopefully, practice and all of your clients experiencing ambiguous loss. So I think it's pretty exciting times in that landscape.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, Rose. What a good idea to use our social media platforms in such a way. Yeah, good idea. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Until next time, stay safe and continue to practice relationally. I just don't get to say it one day.
No, I'm not saying it. See ya.
Bye.
But maybe someday